Alright everyone, welcome back to the part 2 of this AI comparison video. Just a quick recap, in part 1 we have compared the different AI models on solving complex math problem, tested how much context each of these large language models can process, their accuracy, and their connectivity to the latest information. So far, I think the GPT model is still leading, with Claude2 chasing its tail. Next, we will be comparing their coding capabilities, their creativity, and content writing capabilities. Let's see if Google Bard is able to shine here. So next, moving on to our factor number 5, which is on coding, right? So what we're going to test here is to see how each model generate code and whether, are they accurate? Are they able to allow me to run whatever code that they have created for me? So over here, what I'm going to do is really simple. I'm just going to run a simple prompt to create a basic AI chatbot using the GPT's API, right, with Python. Right, so I've previously already run it once, basic ChatGPT bot, right? So over here, create a basic chatbot using with GPT API using Python. So I'm just going to use this zero-shot prompt and I'm going to try it across the different various models, right? So let's just very quickly do it for the rest. I'll come back again once it's all done. Okay, so over here, I've done it with the Claude AI as well. He has given me the code. It's somewhat similar with the GPT model one. I'm just going to go head over to Llama2 and try it as well. So instead, I'm just going to use POE for Llama2 and I'm just going to skip on ahead, right? So over here, I have with me Video Studio Code and I have already added in all the 5 different codes that is generated by the AI itself, the simple chatbot, right? So I'm just going to run every single one of them and we will see whether it does work or not, right? So I've also added in the API key for each of these chat and I'm just going to run this. So this GPT.py, it's by GPT-4, okay? So let's see if it works, right? So now the chatbot has appeared. So as you say, my name is Sunny, what is yours? Okay, and it's giving me gibberish, right? So this is by GPT-4. Okay, so I think what's missing here is the setting adjustments for the temperature and so on. So that's why it is just being very creative and it's just giving me gibberish, right? So if you have watched my old video on Playground, where I've shared how this large language model actually works, right? And these temperature settings will affect the output of the prediction model. So hence, what we are seeing here is just all gibberish, right? So I would say maybe this code that's created by GPT-4, it works, but it's not perfect, right? It's missing a couple of settings over here, but this is just a zero-shot prompt. Obviously, if you run this prompt several times, you might land on one that gives you a more complete code. Okay, so moving on to Bard, I didn't really had a good feel about this initial code that they have given to me. It's using Gradio, which is more like a UI interface. However, it's missing the API key. So I'm not sure if it works, but let's try it, right? Okay, so it's giving me a lot of errors here, like it requires the input and outputs. So yeah, so it doesn't work. So just to keep things short, this code doesn't work at all. Okay, so now I will move on to the next one. Now moving on to Claude, we're going to run this as well. All right, so it seems like the first prompt seems promising. Let's ask, who are you? Okay, and he's telling me that, oh, my name is Ashley. What is n multiplied by 2? Yep, so I guess it is working, right? It's responding to me. It's not giving me gibberish. So I will just take it as the code that Claude2 generate seems fine, right? So moving on to Llama, okay, and who are you? Software engineer. What programming knowledge are you good at? 20 divided by 2. Okay, so same things for Llama, it's working pretty well. All right, lastly is this GPT 3.5 one. I'm just going to run this code. Not sure why is it not working. Let me just close all of them and try again, right? Okay, so Python GPT 3.5.py. Okay, so who are you? My chatbot. What can you do? Oh, okay, very simple one. And that's because it's using Text DaVinci 002, which is the GPT-3 model, which is the older version. So I think it's just more simple, right? Of course, you can change up the models over here as and when you want, but it seems to be working. So what is 450 plus 232? All right, so seems to me that it's working very well as well. So far, GPT-3, Llama, and Claude seems to be working. Surprisingly, the one with GPT-4 is not really working. It's giving me gibberish. I'll just do one last test, alright? Just one last test. Probably just a simple maths question. What is 20 minus 5? Yep, so it's just giving me gibberish. Is something wrong with the code over here? It could be the Da Vinci model, right, that it has given me, because again, this is a zero-shot prompt, so obviously it's not the most fair way to run this, because I just use a zero-shot prompt for all of them, right, just to make it fair. But again, it is not that fair because maybe the iteration, something went wrong, right? And of course, we could actually just try something like that to see if it works. Okay, close all of this first, and I'm going to rerun this whole thing. Okay, now it's much better. So I think it's really the problem with the model that was given to us earlier on. What is 300 plus 252? Okay, yeah, so it's much better now. I would say everything else is good except for the but one, which is terrible, right? Okay, so that's for coding. Again, if you want to code any software app, GPT is one of the way to go. From here, you can see that Claude and Llama, it's working as well. I will not go into like very details or go create something that's very complex because that's beyond me. So just for example's sake, which is why I just use this very simple example. Okay, so next we are going for factor number 6, which is test out each large language model's creativity. I will be testing their creativity of each large language model with a creative writing task. So this task is a task that I've actually done before in my previous tree of thought prompting framework video. So you can visit if you want a detailed version. So the task is as follows. This is the prompt that I'll be using. It goes something like, you are given the following 4 sentences. The sun set over the horizon. She found a mysterious key in a drawer. The concert was a huge success. He finally solved the riddle. And then your task is to write a coherent passage with 4 paragraphs, each ending with one of these sentences. So it allows us to see how powerful the large language models are because I have given them 4 very different sentences where they would have to write 4 paragraphs, each ending with these 4 random sentences, right? Which is these 4 random sentences, okay? And they have to string the paragraphs together and flow well into a coherent story, right? So it is up to the AI's creativity to do that. I've run this test before with the tree of thought prompting framework, and of course that's the best performing one. But today we're just going to do a zero-shot version of this iteration, right? With all the various models to see how they fare. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time, so I'm just going to skip on ahead to the end results so that we can save up all the time to really evaluate each of these generations. Okay, so back on the screen here, this is the results. Basically, again, what I want is to create a coherent story, right, with 4 random sentences, right? So this random sentence should be at the end. I've even gotten the AI model to bold the words, okay? So this is the result for the ChatGPT 3.5 version. Honestly, on first glance, it wasn't really what I want, but at the very least, they did manage to accurately add in the random sentences into each of the paragraphs. However, the story is somewhat disconnected. It's not really very coherent, but that said, it still did a fairly good job, right? So I'll say this should be a pass. It's for 5 upon 10. It didn't really put each of the random sentences at the end of each paragraphs. So GPT 3.5, I'll just say maybe it just got a fairly good grade, like maybe a 5 out of 10, right? For GPT-4, it did everything that I asked it to do. The story is also much more coherent. It flows much better. But somehow each paragraph is still very fragmented. It's still sort of like breaking up the entire content into 4 different stories. However, at the very least, the random sentence for each paragraph do flow very well. It did whatever that I told it to do, which is to include that random sentence at the end of each paragraph. Alright, so then for Claude2, it did what it did as well. It's pretty good. Very much similar to the GPT-4 one, but this time round, I actually felt that this story is more complete, right? It flows well from one to the other. It is always about Jane, right? So at least for Claude2, it's consistent, although it didn't put every single one of these random sentences right at the end of each paragraph, but it did manage to put it more towards the bottom of each paragraph instead. It's just that it's not at the last sentence, okay? But that doesn't matter. It still did a pretty good job, except for the last one where they are talking about Jane, but because of the he here, they kind of like just use he, finally solve the riddle, right? But this is talking about Jane, right? That's the only problem, but I would say Claude2 did as equally as good as the GPT-4, which is surprisingly powerful, right? For Claude2. For Llama, it's just ridiculous. I don't even want to bother going through it. They did have a very coherent storytelling only for the first two paragraphs. The third and the fourth paragraphs are not really linked to one another, and instead of writing the sentence at the end, they write it at the beginning. One more thing is that when I got it to bold the sentence, they couldn't do it at all, right? So I had to bold it myself. Okay, so lastly, Googlebot, this is a total disappointment because as you can see, this is what I get. Although they did bold it, but it didn't do everything that I asked it to do. I want the sentence to be at the end of the paragraph, not at the start. And the story also don't really make sense. They are more like sentences rather than a story. It doesn't flow very well at all. It's just paragraphs, right? They're just creating standalone paragraph. So that's it for the test over here. I still couldn't get the Falcon to run. Probably I'll do it at the end of the video. Okay, but in any case, let's just update our sheet over here. I will say the GPT 3.5 is probably a 5 out of 10. And then the GPT 4 is an 8 out of 10. Claude is also an 8 out of 10. Llama is probably just a 5. Google is just a 3, right? Actually, Llama, I would say probably is a 3 as well. So yeah, so that's my scoring, right? I'll put a prompt as well as the results in a document in the description below. Okay, then we will move on to our content writing test. Okay, so moving on to our last and final test, we will be running this test to see how long of an article each of these models can generate. We'll be looking at a few things. Number one is the word count of the article based off a zero-shot prompt, right? And then I will also look at the SEO score of each of the articles that is generated by these various large language models, followed by its originality, whether the articles created has a high plagiarism score or not. And lastly, of course, I'll look at the AI detection to see if the content that is created by these large language models can be picked up by AI detection tools. Okay, so as you can see here, I've generated one article using each of the different large language model. Right now, this is a prompt that I used, right? So I've already, prior to this, there is a prompt that I've gotten from one of the Forbes website. It's a very simple prompt. I'll put it in the description below as well. So I've gotten it to generate for me a list of outline, right? So I've used this outline along with this prompt to try and generate a 2,000 word article with this writing style and format. So in any case, this is not really a zero-shot prompt. It's a prompt with guidelines and also a specific style, right? But to keep up with consistency, I've used the same prompt across all the different large language models to generate an article based on these various models. Okay, so I'm going to be copy and pasting all these individually into the SEO tool to see its word count and also its SEO score. Okay, so we are going to be starting off with the first one, which is from GPT 3.5, right? And I'm going to paste it inside here. Alright, so the score that you can see here is 41 and the word count is 1,445 words. So it didn't hit the 2,000 word count limit, but at the very least, it's above 1,000 too, which I think is pretty impressive, right? So I'm just going to put it here, 1,445 words and SEO score is about 41. Then I'll move on to our GPT-4 to see what's the score, right? Okay, so GPT-4 is rather disappointing. It's only hit a score of 36, but this is also partially due to the word count. It only generated 724 words. So I'm guessing the chat version of GPT-4 has a specific maximum length setting set to it so that it doesn't go beyond its token limit. So that's for GPT-4. Let's record it down. 724 words with a score of 36, which is rather low. Then we move on to our Claude2. So Claude2 surprisingly has a score of 41 with only 974 words. Let's record this down. 974 words, and it has the same score as our GPT 3.5. It's pretty impressive because with a short amount of words, it managed to have a pretty high score, high SEO score, meaning to say that it did very well in terms of including some of these keywords into the content itself. Right, then we move on to the next large language model, which is our Llama2. Okay, so surprisingly, Llama managed to generate a high amount of word count, which is 1,790, right? Which is pretty impressive because this one prompt iteration, right, it managed to generate close to 2,000 words article. Okay, but the SEO score is still pretty low. It's about 36. Having a high word count like that and only reaching a 36 score would mean that you have to optimize a lot more harder to get the score up, right? So this is the only one point that probably I might not really like. Okay, so last but not least, Googlebot. So Googlebot seems to have the highest score of 50 and a word count of 1528. Okay, so Googlebot in this case seems to do pretty well in terms of the SEO score. After all, they are the king of search, right? So it did pretty well in terms of generating this content. But I did have one problem when I was generating using Googlebot, which is it doesn't conclude, right? It doesn't give me a conclusion. It just stopped halfway, and when I get it to continue, it just tells me that it couldn't do it, right? It's over here, I just tell it to please continue, and then when it ended here, I tell it please continue writing. If it's not the end, it tells me that I can't assist you with that, I'm only a language model, and so on, right? So it kind of like a little bit wonky still, which is why I'm still pretty disappointed, right, with the results, right? So but the score here really is something else, right? 50, which is the highest among the rest. Okay, now off to the originality. We want to see what's the plagiarism score like, right, for each of these articles generated by the various models. I'm going over to my tool over here. I use CopyLeaks because that's what I have. There are other tools out there which I don't really use. Okay, so we start off with the first one, which is the GPT model, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so this GPT model has 10% identical, which is quite high. I don't really like that because identical just means that it's exact match, fully plagiarized from another website, right? Word for word. It doesn't even paraphrase or anything. So minor changes are the ones that sentences that are somewhat similar and then they paraphrase it. So there's a 10% of these being lifted, right, using ChatGPT 3.5, which is not what we want. Okay, and over here, when we look at the alerts, it says here suspecting cheating AI text detected, so it didn't pass the AI detection. Okay, so I'm just going to write here failed 10% plagiarism, okay, which is 90% original. All right, then we move on to our next scan, which is, if I'm not wrong, it's GPT-4. Okay, wow, impressive. So GPT-4 has a 0% plagiarism, right? And it is not being detected as AI at all. Right, so it seems like the prompt that I've used for this particular GPT-4 generation doesn't seem to have any match, because oftentimes when I used it, there will be quite a fair amount of plagiarism, right? So this is 100% original, AI detection bypassed. Let me just change this to detected. Okay, so GPT-4, impressive one. Let's just move on to our next one, which, if I'm not wrong, is our Claude. Okay, so yeah, Claude2, same thing as ChatGPT 4, no plagiarism was detected and it bypassed. So no plagiarism was found and it also bypassed the AI detection. Alright, so let me just update here, 100% original, bypass AI detection. Okay, and then we move on to our next one, which is our Llama2. So our Llama2 over here has a total of 5% match, 3.8% matching, which is, I think, is still alright, because it's just a couple of sentences that are being lifted. Sometimes it might just be a definition, right? Which is still okay, right? Minor changes 1.7%, identical is 3.8%. So I think this is still alright and it just passed the mark. Okay, so if we look at this, suspected cheating, AI text detected, very high. Okay, so it means it doesn't bypass the AI detection. Okay, so it's a 95% match or 94.5% match to be exact, but let me just round it up, right? And this, just put here detected. Okay, lastly, Google. Alright, so Google did a good job in my SEO score. This doesn't look good. Seems like there's a really high amount of plagiarism. Right, so identical, meaning exactly lifted 100%, is 10%. Right, and minor changes about 8%. I'm still okay with the minor changes because it's at least it's paraphrased. But identical is definitely a no-go because it's just plagiarizing 100%, right? So you're just lifting passages of other people's content, which going to result in penalties for Google search, right? So there's a 10% here, which is not something that is ideal at all, right? And if we look at the AI detection, it didn't pass the AI detection as well. Alright, so all the numbers are in right now. Based on this, we can see that the GPT model is still the strongest of them all, right? But I feel that it's only due to their advanced data analysis function and also their plugins, right? So ChatGPT is really powerful with their plugins and some of these additional functions like your custom instructions and so on. But without it, I feel the default version, especially the ChatGPT 4, right? The context window is really too small to do anything complex, right? You probably only can do very basic stuff. But on the other hand, Claude2 is really what surprises me, right? Their context window is so huge, and along with the great content that they are able to generate, really put it on par with the GPT model, right? So the only downside is that they are not able to connect directly to the internet. And if you want to get it updated with information, you will need to prime it by uploading text files into the chat. But of course, that is still possible because Claude2 context window is really huge. You can paste in like any amount of words. If it's 100k means you can probably put in, I don't know, several pages worth of words, right? But that said, there is one workaround that allows you to use Claude2 in the chat with direct internet connection. You can even get it to access Reddit, YouTube, and many other sources for information, right? But it is a paid tool, so you would have to pay and subscribe in order to use that function. But I will not be covering that so much over here. If you are interested, do let me know in the comment section below. I can do a video on that. Apart from that, I feel Llama2 model is still fairly strong considering it's an open source large language model. Right, but even though I feel it still have some time to play catch up in order to challenge the GPT models, right? As for Google, I can't describe how disappointed I am with this AI as the pioneer of this space and having so much search data. Their AI is just nowhere near GPT. And even Claude2, right? It's even losing out to Claude2. You see the table here, it's failed so many times. I guess the only good thing is that it's updated with information. When you ask a question, you are able to get sources cited as well. So you know where they are getting the information from and you are able to do the fact check. So I think in terms of fact checking, probably Googlebot will stand a better chance. But the rest is just not really good, right? But of course, do let me know in the comment section as well if my test actually does it any justice. If not, feel free to let me know. I can run other tests on Googlebot as well. But I have been using it for quite some time, right? Honestly, it just isn't as powerful as the GPT models. So yeah, I think Googlebot is still able to perform simple tasks. Not really an issue with simple tasks, but if you want to get it to replace or speed up some of your actual daily work to improve your productivity or whatsoever, it's definitely nowhere near the others. Alright, so finally, Falcon 180 billion parameters. Unfortunately, I'm still not able to use it. The demo version is working now, but it's just that it's still really a little bit wonky when I try the demo, right? So if I really want to test this, I might have to run it locally on my PC, which might just blow up my GPU because it's 180 billion parameters. The file size is huge. The VRAM that's required to run this, can really be quite taxing on the PC, right? But in any case, I will try it. If you want to see a video on that, do let me know in the comment section. But no promises, right? I do not know if my PC can handle it. In any case, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed this video, do smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. In the next couple of videos, I might just focus more on Claude or dive in more deeper into Midjourney, maybe explore a little bit more on the text-to-image AI generator. So stay tuned for them and stay safe.